Antony, why call it now? I mean, the headlines are that the Conservatives are going to face a thrashing at the polls. What are the numbers saying?
Well, they won the last election with an 80-seat majority. They won 365 seats in the 650-member House of Commons. They've lost 20 seats since through a combination of by-elections and defections. So they've lost the number of seats. Of their 340-odd members, 70 have already announced that they're not going to recontest the election. The expectation is that number's going to rise. There were very good inflation figures out yesterday. The Prime Minister, that was one of his promises when he became PM, that he would drive down inflation, and that's happening, which possibly raises the chances of interest rate cuts in the future. But the perception is they were going to go later in the year. I mean, you've got the American election later in the year. You're getting into winter again. Summer elections, usually what normally happens. The last one was in December, simply because Boris Johnson wanted one before Brexit came into place. So there's a number of reasons why they wouldn't go through to winter. But I think it's a sign that they think, the song that was playing today, things can only get better. I mean, there was a concern that they could only get worse for the government from here. Although it does appear that it's the decision of the Prime Minister, that he hasn't consulted too widely on the subject, because it's caught a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, it's caught quite a few MPs by surprise as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, it was what was not expected. There was always the chance that it was going to be during the summer. The normal time would be May, at the same time as the local government elections. They didn't do that. The perception was they might go in autumn. They probably wouldn't have waited till November. But still, 4th of July was a bit of a surprise.
So tell me about the individual leaders' popularity. You've obviously got the Labor leader, Keir Starmer, and then you've got Rishi Sunak, who you've already canvassed somewhat.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is I covered the 97 election, which is very similar. And for those who don't know, Things Can Only Get Better, which was that song, was the Labor Party's theme song in 1997. So to have the press conference in pouring rain, hijacked by that song, was just a sign of poor planning of whatever they did do today. Look, Labor's well ahead. Keir Starmer's come in. The Labor Party's had a problem that had Jeremy Corbyn at the last 2 British elections, a man who spent decades in Parliament and never made it onto the front bench until he became leader, a man that was not going to win the 2 previous elections. They've replaced him with Starmer, who's much more towards the centre of the party. They're not offering a lot of vision and hope, it must be said. I mean, this is pretty grim times post-Brexit in Britain, but he's still far ahead of the Conservatives. Of course, the Conservatives won the last election with Boris Johnson. They had to depose him after one scandal after another. They went for Liz Truss.
49 days.
And was out very quickly. And Rishi Sunak became the new leader. And it's just, I mean, he's not inspired. The government has now been there since 2010, which is, 14 years. They're going to the election and asking for another 5 years. It's always a difficult ask for a government at the end of its time in office. It's sort of natural time limit to get re-elected. Back in 1992, they'll think about this, John Major won another election. I don't think that possibility is here. This looks like 1997, and Labor's more than 20% ahead in many opinion polls, and first past the post means that would produce potentially a big Labor victory.
What's going to resonate more with voters? We've heard some statements or some slogans already. Sir Keir Starmer has declared it's time for change. Rishi Sunak is saying he's going to fight for every vote and go in as the underdog.
Well, I mean, it's time is the standard phrase that all parties like to run on from opposition if it's reached that period of the government. The government's problem, the Conservative government's problem, is it's just been racked by instability in this term. It doesn't have a good economic story to tell. Brexit has turned out there was no national consensus about what to do with Brexit, so the economy just continued on as it was, but now not part of the European market, with many of its export markets cut off. It hasn't come up with any new trade deals. The country's just become a grim place. It's got problems in the national health system, difficulty funding it. There are just so many problems there. The new Labor administration is not going to come to office with answers to those problems. It's going to probably continue on with the same sort of economic problems the country's got. But it's clear that the government that's there at the moment has reached its use-by date.